have to get through this first. The idea of specific things that scare kids is super fascinating to me, because it varies pretty hard from person to person. Alright, so personal anecdote. When I was a kid, I went to the movie theater with my entire family, and we were going to watch Ice Age 3: Dawn of the Dinosaurs. I was pretty pumped. We got our snacks, shuffled into the theater, and all sat down in our seats to watch.
How do you get scared of that? Oh God, it's really crazy. Like me personally, I'd never.
Trailers for other movies before the main feature started. One of the trailers that played
I mean,
that day
he's little, I
was for a
guess.
movie called Aliens in the Attic, which features these super creepy looking CGI aliens. I was so scared by these designs that I started to have a mental breakdown in the theater and made our entire family go home. I
Wait,
never
I
ended
thought
up
you
seeing
were
it called Aliens in the Attic, which features these super...
Holy fuck, I'd be scared too, I guess. Yeah, if I was 5.
Yeah.
If I was 5, I'd be scared the
If I was
fuck.
5, I still wouldn't be scared.
Bruh, yes you would.
Nah,
You really
yeah.
would. But how do you even go through a movie with these things looking at you and then go play with you?
creepy looking CGI aliens. I was so scared by these designs that I started to have a mental breakdown in the theater
watching,
and
ignore
made
the
our
background
entire
audio.
family go home. I never ended up seeing Ice Age 3, even to this day. This incident stuck around with me for a long time, and for years, I was terrified of going into the movie rental shops around my town because of the fear that I would see the cover for Aliens in the Attic. Yeah, it was pretty bad. It's small things like that example
What
that
the
can really
fuck is
stick with a
that?
kid for the most bizarre of reasons. And another piece of media that scared me when I was younger were the Wiggles puppets. The Wiggles are a
hell
group
no,
of
I
4
could-
Australian
The
guys.
No,
Wiggles?
see me personally, I would never. If you were like little doing that, I get how you'd watch it and I'd be scared and whatnot. But I would be. I couldn't even look at that shit.
The
without screaming.
Wiggles?
Mhm.
Yo, isn't that like the gay Australian band who made songs back in the day?
Were pretty popular back in the 90s and 2000s. They were the stars of countless shows and one-off VHS and DVD
How do
videos.
you
I
deal
grew
with
up
that
watching the
piece of
Wiggles
shit?
and have fond
I'd
memories
be
with a lot of the
scared
content I
as
watch
hell
from
with a
them.
fucking
What I don't
green
have
ass
fond memories
dinosaur,
of
Aubrey
are
and
these
Barney
fucking
looking ass.
terrifying
Nah,
puppets.
nah,
I don't know what they were thinking when they
nah. I'm never doing that. Never in my life. Not even if I'm 85, I'm not gonna do that. No, correct. No, gang. I'm not gonna pull it. I'm not gonna. No. Just no.
No, you better stop.
Stop now.
decided to go ahead and make these. But they were featured in a few Wiggles specials and
Ooh.
such, where they would be used to perform Alvin and the Chipmunk style versions of existing Wiggles songs. These puppets are creepy for a variety of reasons, but the lifeless, latex rubber faces they have is easily the main factor. I would personally always try to avoid the Wiggles DVD and VHS tapes that I had that featured these puppets.
I
And
would
to this day,
too.
I'm still freaked out about them. The whereabouts of these puppets now is mostly unknown, but it's confirmed that one of them disintegrated, and another one was actually in a museum for a bit, before being thrown in a Wiggles warehouse to rot away forever. Yeah, this image is kind of creepy. It's safe to say that nobody really cares to try and preserve these
Right, it's
things,
gonna
which I
hurt
can't
me.
really blame them for. So what if I told you there's a FNAF fan game based on these Wiggles puppets, and it's genuinely one of the scariest, most intense FNAF fan games I have ever played? And
I
what
would
if I
love
said
to
that the
see it.
game
I
in
would love to play
question
it too.
was made in Blender?
what about
No, not
Boxy
just
Boo?
modeled in Blender, fully made in Blender, programming and all. Well, everybody, allow me to introduce Phobia the Awakening, aka my childhood trauma coming back to haunt me. Created by IHS Games, Phobia the Awakening takes the
No,
terrifying
bro.
designs of the Wiggles puppets and throws them
Holy
into a
shit.
FNAF-like setting. The game actually has quite a bit of history,
Stop.
being finished
I'm
well
not
before it was
doing
actually
that.
released. The
Actually,
version
I'd
I will be
play it.
talking about is the most recent
But if
release
that
of the
was
game
real life,
that just came out
I'm
within the last
out.
couple months, which fixed a lot of the
I'm
issues the
burning
game
it
had.
down.
Going into this game,
Yeah,
I really
that
didn't know
is
what to
real
expect. I mean, I had never played a game made in
every
Blender
window
before. I didn't
broken.
even know a version of Blender could make games before I found out about this one. Similar to those nights at Rachel's,
there's
Phobia the
something
Awakening
funny.
is a real-time 3D game that's still structured as if it was a classic
Yeah,
click-through
it's
FNAF game,
No,
which I'm
see,
always a bit hesitant
I'm
on.
never
Rachel's
gonna
was a
do that.
pretty decent game, but it
Yeah,
still
Rachel's
felt a bit
is
janky,
good.
and never really used the fact that it was in real-time 3D
Yeah.
for anything super cool outside of the flashlight and maybe some of the cameras. It's apparent right
I
away when
feel
playing
like
Phobia
this game, I'm
that this
just
game
gonna-
really
I'm not
uses
gonna
it being
be
in
one of those
real-time
people.
3D to its advantage. You can look around the entire office,
See, if we get, like,
which is
a whole
always a
lot of
cool
likes
idea,
and
but the
views,
placement
and
of
I'm
everything in
making
the office
cash
is what
off
really
of
takes
this,
the cake for me.
I'm
The
donating.
clock, so you know what
Actually,
time
I'm
it
gonna
is,
do a giveaway.
It's behind you.
With the money I'm
And that's
making,
the
I'm gonna
only
give
reason
something
you
to y'all.
ever need to look back as well. So if you want to check where you're at during the night, you gotta make sure you're safe doing so. It's a really small
Actually,
thing, but it that totally
I
adds
get,
a
like,
little more pressure to the gameplay.
a view,
And then there's the mask.
or, like,
We'll talk
more
about the
than that,
actual
I'm
gameplay
making
regarding
a
the mask
video
later. But
next
for
day.
now, I just want to talk about its placement in the
Or
room. The
same
mask
day.
isn't just a bar at the bottom of the screen you need to flick up. It's an actual mask in the office that resides under your desk, and you need to pick it up and wear it. Which, once again, is such a small thing, but a really cool detail. It'd only be fitting to talk about the visuals of this game first, since it's one of the most interesting parts of it. All the character models in Phobia are a little bit low poly. Not like N64 retro low poly, but the characters aren't the smoothest. However, I actually think this visual approach, whether it be intentional or just because of the limits of the engine, adds a lot to the horror factor of the game in a very similar way that the
Don't tell
pre-rendered
me-
graphics of the original
Wait,
FNAF
don't
games
tell
did.
me you
Everything
see
is
yourself
very
in this
unsettling
building.
looking. And mixed with
No,
the
I'm
design
about
of the
to
animatronics,
fall off the
it
$1
absolutely does a good job of being
I
scary.
wouldn't take
The
$5 off
environments
the
are
$1
fine
billion
for the
now.
most part. Nothing crazy here outside of the office, really, but the animatronics on the cameras look really
Billions
sick.
of
The vent
billions.
cameras in
$1 billion?
particular
Only
have
one
some
night?
fantastic frames, with the
Damn,
super
I'm
harsh
doing it.
lighting on very
Bro, I'm
metallic
doing
looking
it.
I'm keeping the
designs.
mask on.
Captain Feathersword, which is this
Keeping
pirate
the mask on
animatronic
and the
also
camera
based on an
up.
existing
What
Wiggles
are they
puppet,
gonna do? I'm hacking
also
the
has some great
system.
camera frames, and a good majority of his look pretty
They didn't
freaky.
say I couldn't bring
Going
my
back to
water
the
buckets.
office, I have to talk about the hallways. In most
What?
FNAF games,
Or a
if
water
an animatronic
gun.
is in a hallway close to your office, that usually means that they're a
Bring a
single
freaking-
phase away from
bring
attacking
some
you.
water
This is
for me.
because most FNAF games are in 2D, so having actual movement in the hallways is usually just not possible. I am so used to this in fan games that when the animatronics in the hallway started slowly walking towards me, I was not prepared for it in the slightest. The amount of pressure this game builds when you have two threats slowly walking towards you on either side, and you never truly know when they're ready to strike, is crazy. You don't just deal with them when they're at the closest point in the hallway either. They walk right into the office. There's some other cool visual related stuff in the game, but it's tied to parts of the gameplay, so I'll talk about it when we get there. For now, I actually want to talk a bit about the sound design in Phobia. Sound design is rarely an aspect of a game I give an entire section dedicated towards, but it's genuinely so good here that it's totally worth talking about. The most notable thing here is absolutely the music. The way it builds up as you get closer to 6 a.m. didn't fail to make my heart race a single time. It's genuinely a perfect inclusion. The way the animatronics talk and babble in the hallways makes everything feel so much more chaotic as well. Pretty much every voice line is distorted in some way. And when everyone starts talking back to back, it gets really stressful. The sound design in Phobia does a near perfect job at building stress with audio, better than almost every other FNAF fan game I've ever played. Anyway, it's about time we talk about the gameplay loop. Phobia the Awakening's gameplay loop is one that takes a lot of different ideas from other FNAF games and meshes them in a way that works surprisingly well and creates a strong level of stress alongside the audio and visual aspects we already talked about. The first night introduces 3 different animatronics: Jimmy the Elf, Jeff, and Murray. Let's go over Jimmy first, since he's literally right in front of you in the office. Jimmy is kind of like if you took the salvage sections from Pizza Simulator and just plopped a slightly altered version of those mechanics into a FNAF gameplay loop. It's not a super original idea or anything. In fact, Scrap Baby works in a pretty similar way in UCN. But I feel like the implementation of the mechanic here works extremely well at keeping the pressure on and always having something to pay attention to. Jimmy has different phases he can enter, both when you're looking on the cameras not at him, or when you're looking away from him in the office. The first phase has him looking down, then his eyes shoot up, then he straightens up and looks directly at you, and finally he leans over the table with his entire body. If you leave Jimmy in this phase for too long, he'll jump scare you at the next possible opportunity. You're given an electric shocker just like in the salvage sections, and using a shock on Jimmy will bring him back to phase 1. You have to be careful not to abuse the shocker, however, and wait for when Jimmy is either on or close to his final phase. I'm not exactly sure what happens when you abuse the shocker, since I never died to Jimmy that way, but I assume it makes the recharge time longer for the electric shock, potentially putting you in situations where Jimmy's in his last phase but you can't shock him. Either that or he jump scares you if you use it too much. Once again, I never died that way, so I'm not sure. Regardless, I think this mechanic is a great addition to the gameplay loop and gives the office some extra purpose. A good chunk of the characters are pretty camera heavy in their mechanics, and the 2 hallway characters are never really a threat until they're actually in your face. So Jimmy fills out a very useful role that ups the challenge while keeping things balanced. Jeff and Murray are the designated hallway animatronics, and they each come from one side of the room. You never really have to worry about them when they're on the cameras. In fact, I'd say it's a complete waste of time to try to find them on there, because when they enter the hallway, they actually have multiple phases there. They will move forward a bit, then stop, then move forward a bit, then stop, until they've made it into the office. At that point, you gotta go down and grab the mask and wait for them to leave. Sounds easy, and it kind of is. But man, does the
Actually, I'd
pressure
sit in
stack
the
on
back where the
when both of
door
them are
is.
moving towards you at
As soon
once,
as he
and you have to
leaves,
try to keep track of everything else all at the same
I'm out of the
time.
building
The
and
sounds they
go
make when they
home.
move are also super unsettling, and
And then
adds a
I'm gonna
lot
get
to the
there
fact that
about,
they're just
like,
chilling in your
before
hallway, slowly
they
waiting for a
open,
moment to strike.
before
When you
anyone
have
gets
your
there.
mask on and you're waiting for them to leave your
I'm-
office,
then I'm
they get
gonna exit
real
the
up close and
building.
It's
personal,
either that
which
or
I
you
really
stay
love.
there
Normally
and,
I hate fast mechanics in FNAF games,
hook
but
up
it
to
essentially
your
works as a
lever,
more stress-inducing door closing button
USB-C
here,
fast
and I think it
charging.
works pretty well in the gameplay loop flow. Some good shit. The next animatronic that's added to the night is Captain Feathersword, who kinda acts as a mix between the music box from FNAF 2 and Shadow Candy from Five Nights at Candy's remastered. Feathersword resides in his own camera close to the main Wiggle show stage. As long as you check up on him often, he will never leave that camera for the entire night. However, leave him alone for too long, and he'll instantly kill you and end your night. Just kidding, this isn't FNAF 2. What actually happens is Feathersword will randomly go to one of the cameras in the building, minus the vent cameras of course, and you have to find him and stare him down to make him return to his main camera. I absolutely love mechanics like this one, because the concept of the music box alone isn't flawed. It's really just how you go about incorporating it into the gameplay. Flumpty's 3 is a perfect example of that, and so is this. This is also a perfect
Flumpty.
example of a music box mechanic done right. Sure, you have to keep an eye on one camera a lot of the time, but there still are other cameras on the map that are required and important, along with the other half of Feathersword's mechanic, literally forcing you to use almost every camera in the building. And the cameras he doesn't use are all occupied by different characters we'll get to later. So pretty much every single camera has a use, and I love that. You get to see all the cool camera frames, and it feels like the game was properly designed with the map of the location in mind. Anyway, if you can't find Feathersword in his camera of choice after enough time passes, then he'll make your way to your office and jump scare you. A really great mechanic overall. Finally, we have the vent characters, Greg and Anthony. Greg and Anthony will make their way to the rooms that have vent entrances in them. They both have multiple phases in the vents, and it's your job to block off a vent before one of them can make it through. The catch here is that you can only have one vent closed at a time, and Greg and Anthony will often try and enter vents at the same time, so you really have to pay attention to see which one is closer to their final phase. It's a really neat challenge, and mixed on top of the other mechanics, make this an incredibly strong and balanced gameplay loop. If an animatronic slips through a vent, they'll enter your office and just stare at you for a bit, which is mad creepy. After only a little bit of time, they will jump scare you and end your night. Once those final characters get locked in and the full gameplay loop is on display, it's an incredibly satisfying and fair challenge to go through, and I really enjoyed my time with Phobia the Awakening. It's fun, very scary, and puts on the pressure in a serious way. However, we're not done yet, are we? During the course of the game, the phone guy makes it pretty apparent that this is not a very safe location. The animatronics are up to some bad shit, typical FNAF shenanigans. On night 5, the phone guy seems pretty upset with the character you play as, Mark, for going back to the location even when it's not safe. You do the night like normal, but when you finish your shift, a cutscene plays. This cutscene features the Greg animatronic walking towards Mark and stuffing his head in an animatronic mask. I was really caught off guard by this. It's a really cool moment. But what happens next is even crazier. When you start up night 6, none of the animatronics are on the show stage, and Captain Feathersword is in a much more aggressive looking pose. After one in-game hour, you'll start to see a new character show up on the cameras, and it's Mark. That's right. On night 6, you now play as someone else as they deal with Mark, who's become aggressive after being forced into the mask. This is such a chilling twist, and I've never seen something like this in a FNAF game before, actually having to defend yourself against the previous night guard. His design is really creepy looking, and you can even see his blood in areas of the location that were previously blood-free. Super cool details. Mark works as a faster combination of both Jeff and Murray. He can appear at either the two hallways and goes from the back of the hall to your office much faster than the animatronics he's replacing. He also gives you much less time to react to it, so you really gotta be
Wait,
quick on the draw.
does he
After
only
a
have
couple
a
more
head?
in-game
Does he have
hours
full
pass,
body?
you'll start hearing some noises coming from the vents. This is when the figure shows up. The figure is this creepy endoskeleton-looking thing with a white mask, and it'll occasionally appear in one of the 3 vents during this night. All you have to do is make sure the vent he's in is locked off before he moves out of it, and you'll be all good. The problem here is just like Mark, he acts fast, and has no faces in the vents. He's just in and out, so speed is key. Feathersword and Jimmy still act the same, but both of them are significantly more aggressive. So while it's less characters overall, it's no easy challenge. Night 6 took me a good chunk of time to beat, but I was never discouraged, and I thought it was a really fun challenge. Night 6 has different, even more suspenseful music that builds up into this crazy song at the end that made my heart race so fast. Finally beating Night 6 was extremely satisfying, and with that, Phobia the Awakening is over. You can look at the 3D models in the extras menu, or find some secret VHS tapes for extra lore, but when it comes to the gameplay, that's where the game ends. This is a game I don't see talked about very often, but it's genuinely one of my new favorite FNAF fan games of all time. I haven't played a FNAF game this thrilling to go through in a long time. With scary visuals, great mechanics, and fantastic sound design, Phobia the Awakening is absolutely worth a playthrough if you're looking for a FNAF game to play. Currently a sequel is in the works, and that looks awesome as well, and I'm super excited to play it when it drops. I was already excited before, I had seen the trailer, but knowing how fun this game was, I'm even more on board now. It's crazy to think this whole thing was born from a set of creepy puppets of Australian white men. What a world we live in. And just a quick...
That's really cool.
Guys, I want to thank y'all for watching this video. Make sure to check out uhyeah. And I want y'all to kind of like and subscribe to our channel, give a check out this, send it to your friends and whatnot. Make sure to check this guy out. He put a whole lot of work into this bullshit. Oh God. Alright,